Why American airports are dying, as millions cancel their trips in 2025. Do you remember the last time you stood in the middle of an international airport in the US, listening to boarding announcements, hurried footsteps, and the warm hugs of reunions? Maybe you don't remember because those moments are slowly disappearing. Today, we're not talking about statistics, not just a 41% drop or how many flights got canceled. Today, I want to talk about something more important, the lost trust, and why the world is quietly stepping away from the American dream. When an airport is no longer a gateway, but a barrier. When an airport is no longer a gateway but becomes a barrier, it's not intentional. It's the consequence of prolonged complacency. Americans once believed the world would always come to them, that the American dream was immutable, that opening the door would cause the world to flood in like a broken dam. But no one lives forever in the glory of the past. A gateway, if it no longer opens to hope, will inevitably become a checkpoint. American airports were once places where you landed and felt you were stepping into the center of the world. Back in the day, when flying was a luxury, landing at a US airport symbolized success, freedom, and opportunity. But today, what once thrilled people now makes them hesitate. I don't need to cite statistics. Just look around. Try applying for a US visa right now. You'll understand what it feels like to be judged before being heard. Try answering the questions at immigration. You'll understand what it means to have to prove your innocence before being accused of anything. And what's more frightening is the feeling of being doubted just because you come from a place that isn't deemed trustworthy. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because of the passport you carry. I used to think America was the land of the free. Now I think they're so afraid of losing power that they're building invisible walls around themselves. The irony is harsh. They once built the Statue of Liberty to welcome the outcast. But at JFK Airport, someone who has never done anything wrong, was held for over 2 hours without any proper explanation. And I wasn't alone. 4 other Asians from the same flight were also invited to a special waiting room. There are things that don't need to be written down. You understand them with just a glance. Security, they say, but security is meant to protect, not exclude. When immigration systems begin operating like bias detectors, that place is no longer a gateway. It's a fence in technological form. The bitter truth is that those building these fences think they're doing the right thing. But a strong nation doesn't need to scare others to maintain its position. A superpower doesn't need to suspect everyone who knocks on its door. Because once airports fall silent from the absence of foreign voices, it's not a sign that security has been secured. It means no one wants to walk through anymore. And when coldness becomes the default, even those who once loved this country will walk away, not with anger, but with a shrug. At that point, America won't be attacked. It will simply be forgotten. And you know what's worse than being hated. It's being considered irrelevant. Travel isn't just going somewhere. It's feeling welcome. People often think of travel as a simple act of consumption. Booking tickets, paying, sightseeing, taking photos, going home. But beneath that surface lies an emotional journey. Because travel isn't just movement, it's a choice. And in every choice, what ultimately drives our decision isn't always price. It's the feeling. Will I feel welcome there? This is something many policymakers in the US have forgotten. They think Grand Canyon, New York, Hollywood, and Disneyland are enough to keep the world coming back. But the world isn't that naive anymore. A beautiful beach can't undo the sting of a cold stare at immigration. A magnificent city can't erase the discomfort of being treated like a potential criminal during baggage checks. And smiles on posters don't make up for frowns in real life. I've been to Japan, to Canada, to Portugal, and I realized something simple. Why people flock to those places, even when prices are sometimes higher than in the US. Because over there they feel welcome, not always through words, but through glances, attitudes, and the smallest acts of kindness. A doorman who smiles, a security officer who nods slightly, a taxi driver who asks if you need help with your luggage. All these add up to one simple feeling. We're glad you came, but in the US, warning signs everywhere. Don't stand here, no photos, keep quiet. Monotone voices over loudspeakers, expressionless administrative faces. A country that once made the world dream now behaves like tourists are a burden they reluctantly tolerate for economic gain. I once saw a Brazilian family, 3 generations, separated into 3 different lines at Miami Airport. Just because they didn't speak English, they looked at each other with worry, as if they were about to be permanently separated. They weren't angry, they were silent, and I knew they would never come back. The problem isn't the system. It's not the budget. It's not the illusionary recovery packages rolled out by federal tourism authorities. The problem is the attitude. The way America sees the world, not as friends anymore, but as strangers to be controlled. And the most dangerous part, the very people who once loved America the most are now the saddest when they have to say goodbye, not with words, but through quiet actions. They book flights elsewhere. They tell different stories to their children. They post different experiences online, and slowly the image of America fades, not as a destination, but as a footnote in a memory. If you think tourists will come back just for autumn in Central Park or the skyscrapers in Chicago, then you misunderstand the nature of human emotion. When high cost isn't the issue, but the value is no longer worth it. Americans often cite cost to explain the decline in international tourism, rising airfare, inflation, high operating costs, a stronger dollar. But they refuse to see the real issue. The world hasn't stopped spending. They just don't want to spend here anymore. No one minds paying for a great experience. Europeans still flock to Kyoto. Chinese travelers still crowd Paris. Indians still head to Sydney. What they need is a sense of worth. The feeling that what they paid for gives them something more than just a photo for Instagram. And in this regard, America has fallen off the rankings. Airfare from Frankfurt to New York may now be 40% higher than before the pandemic, but no one's truly angry about that. They're angry because what they get in return is a borderline torture experience at immigration, hours of waiting met with scowling faces, overpriced hotels with terrible service. I once stayed at a 4-star hotel near DFW Airport, $320 per night. But the elevator was broken, room service shut down after 10 p.m., and the towels were thinner than paper. When I gave feedback, the receptionist just shrugged, and that shrug cost me over $300 a night. That's when I realized I wasn't mad about the price. I was mad because I felt disrespected. Cost isn't the biggest barrier. Neglect is what kills a destination. When a country starts believing people will always come because we're America, that's the beginning of decline. Empires don't fall to bullets. They fall to arrogance. And this arrogance today shows up in hotel price lists, in every immigration command, in every emotionless regulation that no one dares to question. I have a friend who runs a travel company in the Netherlands. He used to organize tours to Florida with ticket prices nearing $4,000 per person, and still sold out. But now, he's moved all the routes to Spain and Italy. When I asked why, he simply said, "I don't want my clients to pay just to feel wrong for being there." One short, emotionless sentence, but worth more than a full national strategy report. There's one thing the people behind federal tourism desks need to understand. The world never stops traveling. They just change routes. And America, if it doesn't want to be a stop from the past, must face the truth. People don't leave because of cost. They leave because it's no longer worth it. You can build more hotels, add more flights, and cut taxes. But if your receptionist's eyes are still blank, if airport staff still treat tourists like a nuisance, if your $20 meal still tastes like cafeteria leftovers, then even if you offer 90% discounts, people will still choose to fly elsewhere, not because it's cheaper, but because that place makes them feel they matter. And in today's world of endless options, feeling like you matter is the most precious thing a country can offer a stranger. America once did that, but today, they're losing it, bit by bit, silently but undeniably. This isn't coincidence. It's a deliberate withdrawal. We often confuse two phenomena, absence and rejection. When airports go quiet, people call it temporary, due to pandemics, economics, global conflicts. But if you quietly observe closely, you'll see this isn't absence due to circumstance. It's a calculated retreat, and that's far more unsettling. Because people aren't leaving in anger. They're not screaming in protest, not filing petitions, not ranting to the press. They're simply redirecting. They cancel their trips. They book tours elsewhere. They seek countries that don't make them pay the price for feeling unwelcome. And once a withdrawal happens in silence, any attempt to bring them back is futile. I look at the list of major travel agencies in Asia. The US once made up 30–40% of high-end tour packages. Now that number isn't even 10%. I asked a friend who runs a tourism company in South Korea, "Why isn't the US on your list anymore?" She replied shortly, "Clients don't ask for it." No one complains, no one is angry, but no one cares either. That's an ending that doesn't need a declaration. Even international organizations, the ones that used to choose Washington, D.C. as a symbolic hub, now choose Brussels, Geneva, or Ottawa. Not because America has weakened, but because people are no longer confident the U.S. will keep its word or provide long-term stability. A nation whose partners must always question next year's policy is not a place anyone wants to invest emotion or plans into. Amazon didn't make headlines when it moved part of its logistics hub from Dallas to Monterey. FedEx didn't hold a press conference when it opened a new hub in Hamilton instead of expanding DFW. But if you look closely at infrastructure flows, you'll see the decisions have been made, and the U.S. is no longer the irreplaceable center. In logistics, credibility isn't about size, it's about certainty, and America is losing that. We're living in an era where nations compete not just in GDP, but in the overall experience they offer to foreigners, who makes you feel more at ease, wins, who makes you feel more respected, retains you, and who makes you feel like you don't have to worry about visas, entry, or temporary stays, becomes the default choice. America used to be the world's default. It used to be the dream destination, but now it's being replaced. Not by war, not by crisis, but by better, smoother, more pleasant alternatives. The cruel part is, there's no alarm bell. No one needs to attack America. They just need to stop choosing it. I don't think this is an accident. This is the result of repeated bad choices and a stubborn belief that people will always come back. But no one stays at a party where the host no longer cares about the guests. And America, silently, is turning from the host into an empty room. No one's shouting, no one's criticizing, only the sound of doors closing, one by one. From the outside, I used to believe that America was an idea, not just a country. A grand idea of freedom, opportunity, and hospitality. But now, standing before empty airports, unoccupied seats and baggage carousels running in dry silence, I have to ask myself, maybe even America no longer believes in its own idea. When a country becomes awkward at welcoming others, it's not just a failure of tourism or economics. It's a crisis of identity. A nation that doesn't know what it stands for, won't know whom it wants to invite or why. Americans are still proud of the American dream, but that dream is now buried under excessive security measures, emotionless immigration rules, and sky-high price tags that reflect greed more than quality. They brand themselves as the gateway to the world, but they're the ones locking the gate from inside. I remember the first time I set foot in America. It wasn't the convenience that moved me. It was the kind look from an immigration officer in Boston, who smiled and said, "Welcome to the United States." That was it. One simple sentence, one gentle reception, but it made me feel seen as a human, not as a risk. Today, many who fly to the U.S. no longer hear such words. Instead, they hear, "Stand there, wait, remove your shoes, why are you here? How much money do you bring?" All of it by the book. But it strips away the most basic element of human interaction, respect. The world today doesn't need more destinations. They need meaningful stops. If America can't offer that, it will be left behind. Not because competitors are stronger, but because it no longer wants to lead. I'm not writing this to assign blame, I'm writing this to warn. Because if an airport is a miniature image of a nation, then American airports are showing us that America has closed off its most glorious part. And if Americans don't start asking themselves who they are, those who once dreamed of America will stop hoping. No resurgence begins with rejecting strangers, and no empire collapses faster than one that stops reflecting on itself. I once believed in the American dream. Maybe you did too, but for that dream to live on, America must do something it's not used to doing. Quietly listen, not through technology, stimulus packages, or empty marketing campaigns, but by looking reality in the face, placing a hand on its heart, and asking, are we still worthy of being someone's destination? If the answer is not sure, then now is the time to begin again. Not by expanding runways, but by expanding hearts. Not by lowering fares, but by raising human value. And not by building more walls, but by dismantling the invisible fences that are killing the world's first impression and its desire to ever return. When a door closes in silence, we're used to imagining the collapse of an empire with a loud bang, of war, crisis, or upheaval. But in truth, some collapses make no sound at all. They unfold slowly, quietly, in the smallest of gestures. A cold glance at customs, a forced smile at the hotel, a canceled flight with no apology. When those things repeat, they're no longer accidents. They become the system. And when a system operates in a way that makes people feel unwelcome, then that nation has begun to isolate itself from the world. I once thought of America as a center, a place where everything intersected, where every journey converged. But if you look at the silent luggage belts at LAX, the shuttered counters at DFW, the faint music echoing unnoticed at JFK, you'll understand there are stories that don't need to be told aloud, because they're being told through absence. The absence of travelers, the absence of voices, the absence of goodwill. And what troubles me most is not the question, why is this happening? But rather, do we have the courage to make others want to return? Because holding someone back never begins with a passport or a plane ticket. It begins with the feeling that they are wanted. I don't believe America has lost hope, but hope doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built through action, through the way we greet a guest, through the way we fix a mistake, through our willingness to admit that sometimes we are the reason someone walked away. And if you, the one watching this video, once had a memory at any of these airports, a beautiful moment, a farewell hug, a reunion glance, an unfinished dream, then please share it, because maybe, just maybe, your story is a small mirror reflecting something America once did very well, becoming part of someone else's memory. The final question I want to leave behind is not for the government nor for the tourism industry, but for all of us who once walked through those gates. Do you still want to return? And if you do, what would you like to be welcomed with? Not convenience, not process, but a kind look, a genuine hello, because sometimes that alone is enough for a nation to hold onto the hearts of the world. If what we've just experienced made you pause and reflect, please share this video with those who once loved America, because we're not just telling a story, we're preserving a memory. And perhaps within those memories lies a day when America learns how to smile again. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this journey.